Illovo, let's talk about them next. Everybody loves Illovo. If you're old enough to know what I'm referring to, it's Illovo's old marketing slogan, for the sugar that is. It's in fact Africa's largest sugar producer, market cap of 14 billion, so very similar to Tongaat Hulett from a moment ago. Extensive agricultural and manufacturing operations in 6 African countries. Also produces raw and unrefined sugar, and refined sugar for that matter, which gets sold up in the European Union and into the United States of America. 51.5% of Illovo is in fact owned by a British conglomerate called Associated British Foods. ABF, I think they call it.
That's right.
It's a price to earnings ratio of 18, a little bit higher, dividend yield of 2%, 2.2% there. Ian, I mean, the purchase was done a couple of years ago. This chart looks totally wrong, but we'll, perhaps that's pref shares or something, but in any event, don't worry about that.
No, okay.
As far as Illovo is concerned, I mean, a couple of years ago when they did the buyout, you know, they came along and did sort of a similar thing where they offered to buy a certain portion of the shares. You like the look of them? I mean, they had a bit of a mishap in Mali where they had to write off a whole lot of money, but they're in Malawi and in Zambia, not so much in Zimbabwe, so that's a plus, right?
Plus there, definitely. And in addition, once again, the electricity production, they are now producing 90%, in fact just over 90% of their own requirement. Okay. And they say within a year they will have excess and be able to feed it into the national grid. Imagine the price of electricity goes up and they get paid back for that. That's an enviable position to be in.
Yeah.
But yes, and then in addition to that, I saw that you mentioned the shareholding. Alan Gray have got 20%.
Okay, so ABF have got 50, Alan Gray 20.
At 21%. So over 70% between those two shareholders. And it just makes me wonder if we shouldn't expect some sort of corporate action sometime in the next year or two. Maybe it's not imminent, but why is the price right up at the top? I just think that it's pointing to something that may well happen, or expectations of that anyway.
Yeah. So for the record, the share price is around 30 rands a share. It's been kind of bobbing around with the rest of the market, but has done well in recent years.
Yeah.
I think ABF, if I'm not mistaken, has had some challenges of its own related to its own business, you know, in the UK and some other things. But clearly the reason they came down and bought it is exactly that. They wanted to be part of a business that would produce sugar down in these countries and then export it back to the home market on the most favorable terms.
Right.
But one shouldn't underestimate, they do actually dominate the sugar market, I understand, in Malawi and in Zambia. So their subsidiaries in which they own these kind of significant stakes are the larger players in those markets, and obviously there's a sugar market in each of these countries. And they've been investing heavily. I know in the Malawian case they put quite a lot of capital, and in Zimbabwe, sort of down near the Kafue River, where there's lots of water and again wonderful climate. So a lot of work to be done. But overall, the outlook in Zambia is a bit cloudy because I know people have been complaining about the president, Michael Sata. But in Malawi, they're very positive because Joyce Banda, the new president, is getting lots of rave reviews.
Yes. No, you know, I think that once again we're coming back to the African expansion program, and I think it's a source of new production, and I think, or developing production. And it's interesting to see that a British conglomerate of this side is prepared to invest a lot in this area, and I think it's a good sign for the future. And as you said, once again, the share price 24 Rand to 32 Rand over the last year, hovering around 30 Rand.
52-week
and
range.
one just wonders if something isn't going to happen. If it stays there, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, but here's another thing just to put on the table. We know that the sugar price globally has tended in recent years to follow the oil price, and the reason is because the Brazilians use a significant part of their sugar crop to turn into ethanol.
Right.
So, you know, the sugar price goes with the oil price because it's become a sort of substitution issue in terms of liquid fuels. So I guess it sounds a bit strange, but to be really positive about Illovo and Tongaat for that matter, you'd have to be positive about the outlook for the oil price. So are you more or less of the view that the oil price looks fairly firm and that, you know, the demand is going to be there for that?
Well, if I have to take a 12-month view, I'd say no, not it's going to go up to $130 again, but maybe in that 100 to 130 range, it could well stay there. We have to remember, going just to oil for a moment, is that the US, previously the world's biggest importer and user, is now a net exporter from December last year. Now, this is a startling change. That must surely put a cap on the oil price and maybe a cap on the sugar price.
But I have noticed that Saudi oil production has been a bit low
Pulling
in
back.
recent months, and people are wondering whether, you know, it's because the Saudis are battling to produce what they did in the past, or whether they're just being crafty. But in any event, I guess I agree with you that that oil price looks like it's kind of range bound.
Yes.
Not a net negative either way.
No.
Okay, so in summary, Illovo, you're hot on that one?
I would go for it, yes.
Good.
As
I
a-
like Illovo too. In fact, we've
Okay.
owned it before,
Oh.
so we'll have to talk about that when
Right,
we get to the
yes.
trade of the day section.